Hi, and welcome to our second piece on the Omicron variant, where we're going to be talking about how to tame our emotional responses. In part one, James and I discussed experiencing a range of difficult emotions in response to the new variant. We shared some of our feelings of sadness, disappointment, apprehension, among other feelings. We've heard from many people in our Katie and James community and know that our colleagues are having intense reactions too, including fear, especially where they sadly lost friends in earlier waves of COVID. We also talked about the importance of naming our emotions, accepting them, and sharing them with a trusted friend. These are vital steps to understand what's going on with us emotionally in a conscious way. Brené Brown states that we feel our emotions on a scale of 1 to 10. If you imagine that, add a 10, that's where we feel them. We pay attention, though, to them only at a 5 and understand them at 3. In part two, we're focusing on practical strategies we can take to tame our emotions so they don't manage us and we can more easily cope with threats like Omicron. This is so important when a collective hysteria can be perceived right now in the press that probably amplifies our individual reactions. And believe me, it doesn't seem, James, to be getting any better with the news we've been seeing about the variant in the last couple of days. And in our view, emotions are the captains of our lives, and reactivity impairs our judgment. It can cause us to focus on the wrong things, distort the facts, rush to conclusions, or catastrophize. One of the things I do. When we're in the maelstrom of threat response, it's also important to know that our whole bodies, our physical bodies, as well as our cognitive brains are engaged. We often forget the physical. And I know, James, you don't think we're heads on sticks, do you?
No, somehow, Katie, it gets drilled into us that our minds are entirely separate from our bodies. They're not. Our human bodies respond physically to a threat, generating adrenaline and cortisol. Adrenaline increases our heart rate, elevates our blood pressure, and boosts our energy supplies. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, communicates with the brain regions that control mood, activating fear. It increases sugars, that is glucose, in our bloodstream and in our brain, fueling alertness, and increases the availability of substances that repair tissues and get us ready for fight or flight. Cortisol also curbs functions that would be non-essential or harmful in a fight or flight situation. It alters our immune system responses and suppresses our digestive system, our reproductive system, and our growth processes. Now, adrenaline and cortisol may be helpful reactions if we're facing a tiger, but prolonged activation of them during the pandemic and suddenly flooding our bodies in the last week is harmful. Our blood pressure may have gone up. We may feel short of breath, triggering asthma if we're sufferers. We may feel exhausted and have trouble sleeping, have muscle aches, headaches, and migraines, stomach pains, and worrying our immunity goes down, making us susceptible to infections. Next, Katie, not only are we filled with difficult emotions, but most of which it's hard for us to recognize and name, but our bodies are doing all sorts of weird things also. What do we do, Katie?
Well, James, we need to learn to self-soothe. Self-soothing is an individual's capacity to calm ourselves when we're in a state of emotional distress. When we quieten our nervous system, we can more tolerate our emotions, start to understand them, and get to know them rather than sort of blanking them out. Now, I know soothing we associate with babies and being soothed by a caregiver or learning to soothe ourselves with a blanket or teddy bear. In my view, James, it's sad we don't stick with the teddy, because as adults, we often turn to grown-up soothers such as drugs or alcohol, sex or shopping, becoming a gym rat or a workaholic, or a combination of all of these things. Or we go to the doctor and get prescribed drugs to sort of calm us down. Now, these soothe our stress temporarily, but they sort of blank out our emotions, and they're particularly addictive and harmful and can take us in a downward spiral. They can help us avoid our anxiety and numb our ability to feel our emotions. But then how on earth are we going to understand them? Our feeling shrinks to 5, paying attention to 2, and our understanding probably to 0. Now, unfortunately, most of us don't know how to effectively self-soothe without turning to these adult substances. We've never been taught how and almost learn by accident. It is very individual, and it's crucial to learn what works for each of us and build a repertoire that we can turn to in different circumstances, and also so we don't get bored. Our chosen soothing activities need to quieten our bodies as well as our minds and deal with that adrenaline and cortisol. We need to move, but move leisurely. It's no use hopping on the bike and doing a massive intervals. That's just going to stimulate our bodies and minds. So it's about moving leisurely. Binge watching a show isn't a soother either. It's a stimulator of our senses and does nothing to calm our bodies. But fortunately, James, there's lots of things we can do. So what do you do?
Well, Katie, as you say, self-soothers are very individual. And for me, some of the things that work best include getting out into nature, really being in touch with my environment outside, the external world, walking around and taking photographs and noticing small things in nature. Maybe being in the garden and gardening and deadheading roses, or walking on the beach, going to the gym, doing some light aerobics or the stepper in the gym, dancing around to music, or going to mass or spending some time in meditation and prayer. What about you, Katie?
Well, I do mindfulness and breathing. And I think in the moment, that's very effective for me. Put away all devices, get off them, get off social media, and avoid, for me, watching the news. The thing that's really worked for me over the years is going for a run, a gentle run, not trying to look at my watch and see what minute miles I'm doing, but a leisurely run to the beach and back. Cooking, I love to bake a cake or some bread, and just kneading bread can be incredibly soothing. And restorative yoga, not the power yoga, not the flowing yoga, but restorative yoga. Well, whoops, James, it's time to summarize, I think.
Well, to deal with the tangle of emotions triggered by Omicron, we need to name, accept, and share our emotions. We need to find self-soothing practices that we like and cultivate 2 or 3 that we can draw on automatically whenever we're stressed to calm our minds and our bodies. Practices that are light physically and gently engage our senses.
Thanks, James. And next we'll be talking about how once we are calmer, feeling more positive and resourceful, new choices magically open up. See you soon.
See you.